Imagine coming home after a long day of work, your feet aching, your stomach growling, and all you want is the quiet comfort of your own house. You pull up to your driveway, but there it is again. A silver Lexus RX sitting smugly in the very spot where your car should be. Not just once, not twice, but for months. This wasn't a random car. It belonged to Blythe Vanderholt, his next-door neighbor. She treated his driveway like it was her own private parking space, striding across his property with the kind of entitlement that made Reggie Carter's blood boil. At first, he said nothing. He told himself it wasn't worth the argument. But every day it kept happening until finally he called the tow truck. Not once, but twice. And what unfolded after that was no ordinary neighborly dispute. It was a public downfall so spectacular, so humiliating, that the entire neighborhood gathered to watch. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. This was about power, pride, and a woman who thought she could get away with anything. But she didn't count on Reggie Carter. And tonight, you're gonna see exactly how he turned the tables, one tow truck at a time. Stay with me until the end, because the story has a twist so satisfying it will make you cheer for Reggie, and rethink what it means when karma finally comes calling. Reggie Carter was not a man who went looking for trouble. In fact, he built his life around avoiding it. By day, he taught science to a rowdy group of middle schoolers in Lakeland, Florida. To his students, he was Mr. Carter, the patient teacher who could turn a boring lesson about atoms into an experiment that fizzled, popped, or smoked just enough to make them forget about their phones for a few minutes. It wasn't easy, but Reggie had a gift for order. He thrived on routine, early mornings with coffee and a crossword, evenings filled with grading papers, and weekends reserved for sports and a little yard work. His house reflected the same energy. A single-story brick home, modest yet carefully kept, with a driveway that was just big enough for him. It wasn't flashy, but it was his sanctuary. The one place he didn't have to share with anyone. That peace lasted until the day he pulled into his street and saw a silver Lexus RX sitting in his driveway like it belonged there. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe a guest at Blythe Vanderholt's house had gotten mixed up. He decided to let it go. After all, mistakes happen. But then it happened again. And again. Each time, Blythe had an excuse ready. A delivery, a drop-off, a quick stop. She'd wave him off with a tight smile, as though his own driveway was some kind of community parking lot. Reggie didn't like it, but he bit his tongue. Until the evening he came home, exhausted, only to find her Lexus dead center in his driveway again. No note, no explanation, no car keys in sight. This wasn't an accident anymore. It was the start of a battle he never asked for, but one he could no longer ignore. Reggie stood at the edge of his driveway, jaw tight, staring at the Lexus like it was mocking him. He exhaled slowly through his nose, then marched next door and knocked on Blythe Vanderholt's door. She answered after a long pause, a wine glass in one hand, her expression already carrying that smug look of "I know why you're here." "Reggie, what's wrong?" she asked, feigning surprise. Her tone was smooth, practiced, dripping with condescension. Reggie nodded toward the driveway. "Your car's in my spot again." Blythe blinked, all fake innocence. "Oh, that? Well, I had a delivery and the driver needed space to back out. I figured you wouldn't mind." She smiled like that explanation should have ended the conversation. "I do mind," Reggie said evenly. "This is my property. I need you to stop parking there." Her sigh was dramatic, her eyes rolling as though he'd just asked for the impossible. "Reggie, I live right next door. It's not like I'm some stranger parking on your lawn." "You're parking on mine," he corrected, his arms crossing over his chest. Her laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Are you really that bothered by a car sitting there for a few minutes?" "It's not a few minutes. Keeps happening," Reggie said, his patience thinning. "And I need it to stop." She finally relented with a lazy shrug. "Fine, I'll move it. No need to get all worked up." She moved it that night, but her tone, her arrogance, her dismissal of his boundaries, it told Reggie everything he needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This was entitlement. And something deep down warned him. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the silver Lexus kept appearing like a bad omen. Every time Reggie thought she'd gotten the message, he'd come home to find his driveway occupied again. Sometimes it was her car. Sometimes it was a guest's, always with the same air of entitlement. When he left a note, it disappeared without a word. When he knocked on her door, she was suddenly not home, and when she did answer, her excuses grew thinner, more brazen. "Oh, I was just dropping off groceries. Oh, my friend couldn't find a spot. Oh, you don't really use your driveway much anyway, do you?" Each word chipped at Reggie's patience. He wasn't a man who raised his voice. He wasn't quick to anger. But his home was his refuge, and Blythe was poisoning it. One night after a particularly grueling day in the classroom, Reggie pulled onto his street and froze. Not one car, two. His driveway was crammed with Blythe's Lexus and a sleek black BMW that definitely didn't belong to him. That was it. Enough was enough. He parked on the street, snapped a photo for proof, and marched to Blythe's door. His knock was sharp, louder this time. She opened it with her usual look of annoyance, like he was the one inconveniencing her. "Whose car is that?" Reggie demanded, pointing to the BMW. "Oh, just a friend," she said breezily. "We're having a little get-together. You weren't home, so I figured it wouldn't matter." "It matters," Reggie said firmly. "This isn't a parking lot. This is my home." Blythe tilted her head, lips curling in a smirk. "Well, you should have said something earlier. I would have moved it." That was the moment Reggie realized. She wasn't just being careless. She was testing him. And if he didn't act soon, she'd never stop. That night, after finally getting his driveway back, Reggie sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone. He hated conflict, hated drama. But Blythe's arrogance had crawled under his skin, and he knew if he didn't push back, she'd keep pushing forward. So the next morning before work, he dialed the number for the homeowners association. Maybe, just maybe, they could set her straight. The line clicked, and a woman answered with the kind of tired, uninterested tone of someone who had heard it all before. "HOA office. How can I help you?" Reggie explained everything. The cars, the excuses, the repeated invasions of his property. He kept his voice calm, factual. By the end, he felt a flicker of relief. Surely they'd take action. But the response was exactly what he dreaded. "Sir," the woman said flatly, "unless there is physical damage to your property, the HOA doesn't typically get involved in neighbor disputes. Have you tried speaking with her?" Reggie pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's all I've been doing." "Well, we can send a courtesy email," she offered, as though that would solve anything. A courtesy email. That was the mighty HOA's solution to months of harassment. Reggie almost laughed. Instead, he sighed, thanked the woman, and hung up. No cavalry was coming. No official body was going to stand up for him. He set his phone down, staring out at the quiet morning street. One thought kept circling in his head. If I want peace, I'll have to fight for it myself. And the next time Blythe parked in his driveway, he promised himself there would be no more warnings. The next morning, Reggie left one final note on Blythe's windshield. Big, bold letters, "Do not park here again." He pressed it firmly under her wiper blade, hoping maybe, just maybe, the message would finally sink in. But when he came home that evening, his stomach dropped. The note was gone. And there, angled across his driveway like a deliberate insult, sat her Lexus RX. Not tucked to the side. Not briefly pulled in. Parked brazenly, as if she wanted him to see it. Reggie pulled onto the street, headlights lingering on the silver SUV. For a long moment, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, the weight of months of frustration pressing down on him. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry anymore. He climbed out of his car and marched to her door, knocking hard. A full minute passed before she answered, wine glass in hand, her posture loose and dismissive. "Reggie," she drawled, like his very presence was inconvenient. "I need you to move your car." His voice was low, steady. "Oh, I meant to text you," she said, swirling her drink. "I figured you wouldn't mind since you always park on the street anyway." Reggie's jaw flexed. I do mind. This is my property. She let out a sharp laugh. Seriously? You're getting bent out of shape over a driveway. He took a step closer, his patience nearly gone. No, I'm getting bent out of shape because I've told you again and again to stop. And you keep ignoring me. Blythe rolled her eyes. Fine, I'll move it. Don't get so dramatic. Reggie turned to leave, willing himself to let it go, until he caught her muttering under her breath. Smug, dismissive. He didn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. The tone was enough. That night, as he sat grading papers, her voice echoed in his head. The arrogance, the entitlement, the audacity, and that's when he decided. The next time she parked in his driveway, he wouldn't knock. He wouldn't leave a note. He'd call the tow truck. Friday evening, the end of a long week. Reggie turned onto his street, his body heavy with exhaustion, until he saw it. Her Lexus, sitting squarely in his driveway like a throne on stolen ground. This time, there was no hesitation. No notes. No knocking. No wasted words. Reggie parked down the street, pulled out his phone, and dialed the number he'd saved days earlier. Sunshine Towing? Yeah. I need a car removed from my property. The dispatcher didn't even blink. We'll send someone in 20 minutes. And right on time, a rumbling tow truck pulled up, lights glinting against the quiet houses. The driver hopped out, glanced at the SUV, then at Reggie. She parked in your driveway? Yep. You got proof of ownership? Reggie produced his deed, already tucked in an envelope. The driver nodded. All right, let's hook her up. Minutes later, Blythe's Lexus RX was lifted clean off the ground, its wheels dangling helplessly. The chains clinked, the hydraulics hissed, and just like that, the car that had mocked him for months was rolling away, swallowed by the night. Reggie stood there, arms folded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Satisfaction. Control. For the first time in months, peace. But it didn't last long. An hour later, his front door rattled with pounding fists. Bam, bam, bam. Reggie rose slowly, deliberately, making her wait. When he opened the door, there she stood, Blythe Vanderholt in silk pajama pants and flip-flops, fury radiating off her like heat. Where's my car? She snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. Reggie tilted his head. You mean the one that was illegally parked in my driveway? Don't play games with me. Where is it? He shrugged, calm, unbothered. Towed. Her face froze, then twisted into disbelief. You did what? You heard me, he said simply. You wouldn't stop, so I had it removed. She let out a wild, hysterical laugh. Oh, you are going to pay for this. Do you know who I am? I'm on the HOA board. Reggie blinked slowly. Good for you. Your car's at Sunshine Towing. Orange Blossom Trail. Have a good night. And with that, he shut the door in her face. But Blythe wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Reggie thought the first tow would settle it. That maybe, finally, Blythe would understand he wasn't bluffing. But if anything, it only lit a fire under her. It started the very next morning. A note taped to his door, scrawled in bright red marker. This is a community. We should all be more considerate of our neighbors. Reggie chuckled, crumpled it up, and tossed it straight in the trash. Then came the HOA letters. One claimed his porch plants were out of compliance with neighborhood aesthetics. The same ferns that had sat there for 2 years without issue. Another insisted his garbage bins had been left out too long. A third accused his mailbox paint of fading. By the fourth letter, Reggie wasn't even mad anymore. He was impressed. Blythe was on a full-blown campaign to make his life miserable. But she wasn't finished. A week later, as Reggie watered his lawn in the fading evening sun, a white SUV rolled up, lights flashing. A private security officer stepped out, hand resting on his belt. Sir, do you live here? Reggie frowned. Yeah. Why? The officer shifted uncomfortably. We got a call about some suspicious activity. Reggie's gaze drifted across the street, and there she was, Blythe Vanderholt, arms crossed, watching from her porch, pretending to be oblivious. Reggie let out a slow breath. Suspicious activity, right? Watering my lawn. The officer looked sheepish. Look, sir. Save it. Reggie cut him off. I know who called. As the SUV pulled away, Blythe smiled faintly, like she had one. But when Reggie marched up to her porch, her face was all innocence. Oh, everything okay, Reggie? Hope nothing serious happened. He folded his arms. You know exactly what happened. You want me to lose my temper. You want something to use against me. She tilted her head, lips curling. Well, maybe some people are just too uptight. Reggie smirked. Calm, controlled, unshaken. I'm done playing games, Blythe. Next time you cross me, I'll push back harder. For the first time she blinked, caught off guard. And that was when Reggie knew. She hadn't seen anything yet. A week later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, Reggie rolled onto his street humming to himself after a good workout. His spirits lifted until he saw it. Her Lexus RX, parked dead center in his driveway, blocking his garage. This wasn't carelessness anymore. This was a challenge. Reggie sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the audacity of it. Today wasn't just any day. His family was on the way over for a backyard cookout, and Blythe had chosen today to make her stand. So he made his call. Calm, steady, unshaken. Sunshine Towing? Yeah, it's Reggie Carter again. Same address, same car. The dispatcher chuckled. Didn't think we'd hear from you so soon. We'll be there in 15. Reggie parked down the street, pulled 2 folding chairs from his trunk, and set one on his porch. When the tow truck rolled up, he leaned back with a bottle of water in hand, watching like it was a show. The driver hopped out, smirking. Doing this again? Looks like it. Some people never learn. The hooks clinked, the chains rattled, and within minutes her Lexus was being lifted into the air once again. That's when the front door flew open. Stop! What are you doing? Blythe's voice cut through the air like a siren. She stormed across her lawn, silk robe fluttering, eyes blazing with outrage. You called the tow truck again? She screamed. Reggie arched an eyebrow, calm as stone. You parked in my driveway again. I have guests over. There's no street parking. Not my problem. You're being petty. No, Reggie said, leaning forward in his chair. I'm being consistent. Something you clearly don't understand. She sputtered, voice breaking with rage, but it was too late. The Lexus was already strapped down, rolling away as the driver pulled off. Her shriek echoed down the street as the tow truck disappeared. And when Reggie's family pulled up minutes later, laughing and waving, they saw her, standing alone on her porch, red-faced and fuming. This wasn't just a driveway dispute anymore. This was a neighborhood spectacle, and everyone was starting to take sides. By Monday morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. The second tow had become the talk of the block. And Blythe Vanderholt, queen of the HOA, wasn't about to let her crown slip without a fight. Her retaliation was swift. That afternoon, inboxes across the community lit up with an email from the HOA board, crafted in careful, passive-aggressive wording. Recently, there have been unfortunate incidents of unnecessary escalation between neighbors. We urge all residents to act with patience and community spirit. They didn't mention names, but everyone knew who it was about. Then came the flyers. Yes, printed, laminated flyers taped to every single mailbox on the street. Is this the kind of community we want? Do we tow our neighbors instead of talking to them? Reggie plucked his from the box, read it once, then chuckled. She was really doing this, dragging her feud into the public square. But the backlash wasn't what she expected. Neighbors started texting Reggie. Parents from school reached out. Even a couple of HOA members quietly sided with him. Hey man, saw the flyer. What the hell is wrong with her? Another read. She tried to fine me $200 for my wind chimes last year. Total nightmare. The best one came from a neighbor 2 streets over. If she parks in your driveway again, I'll split the tow fee with you. Reggie didn't even have to defend himself. Years of her petty power plays, her fines, her complaints. Everyone had their own story. And now that she was flailing so publicly, people weren't sympathizing with her. They were laughing. But the real reckoning came at the next HOA meeting. A meeting Reggie usually skipped. This time, though, he grabbed a front row seat. Because Blythe's empire was about to crumble. The community center smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dry erase markers. Folding chairs squeaked as neighbors filled the room. Some clutching printouts of Blythe's infamous flyer. Others whispering with poorly hidden grins. Reggie sat near the front, arms folded, watching Blythe command the podium like a general addressing her troops. Except tonight, her army looked restless. "Neighbors," she began, voice steady but eyes darting nervously. "We are here tonight to discuss a growing issue of hostility. Certain residents have chosen to involve outside authorities rather than resolving matters civilly. This behavior is, frankly, beneath the spirit of our community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed the word driveway. A few chuckled. Reggie kept his face calm, unreadable, while Blythe continued her speech, painting herself as the victim of an unreasonable neighbor. She carefully avoided saying his name, but everyone knew. Finally, a hand shot up in the back. Mrs. Kim, a petite woman with a razor-sharp tongue. "With all due respect, Blythe," she said loudly. "You parked in his driveway. Twice. Why didn't you just stop?" Blythe stiffened. "I explained. There was limited parking." "That doesn't matter," another neighbor interrupted. "It's his property. You don't park there." More voices joined in. "You fined me for my Halloween decorations last year. You tried to ban my kid's basketball hoop. You threatened to write me up for leaving my dog's bowl outside." The room erupted, years of frustration spilling out all at once. Blythe's face flushed red as she tried to regain control, banging her gavel like a frantic judge. "Order. Please. This is not productive." But the tide had turned. The same neighbors who once tolerated her tyranny were now openly laughing, mocking her attempts to spin the story. And then, from the back of the room, someone muttered just loud enough, "Tow her off the board." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Reggie sat back, hiding a smile. He didn't need to say a word. Blythe was unraveling all on her own. By the end of the night, the board voted to review her position. A polite way of saying her days were numbered. Reggie walked out into the cool night air feeling lighter than he had in months. For once, Blythe wasn't winning. But deep down he knew she wouldn't go quietly. For days after the HOA meeting, the street was unusually quiet. No flyers, no notes, no patrol cars creeping by on suspicious activity calls. Reggie almost allowed himself to think it was over, that Blythe had finally learned when to quit. But Blythe Vanderholt didn't quit. She schemed, started small. A mysterious scratch down the side of Reggie's car. A bag of trash left tipped over in his yard. First, Reggie shrugged it off. Coincidence, maybe. Bad luck. But then came the letter. Not in her handwriting this time. Typed, anonymous, slipped into his mailbox with no return address. "Your actions have been noted. You are a hostile presence in this neighborhood. Remove yourself or consequences will follow." Reggie read it twice, then folded it carefully, sliding it into a file he'd started keeping, labeled simply Blythe. The next evening, the consequences arrived. Blue and red lights lit up his driveway as two police cruisers rolled to a stop. An officer approached. "Mr. Carter? We received a report of loud disturbances, possibly domestic in nature." Reggie blinked. "What? I live alone. There's no disturbance here." Behind them, porch lights flicked on one by one as neighbors leaned out, watching the spectacle. And there, just barely visible in the shadows of her front porch, stood Blythe, phone in hand, feigning concern. Reggie stepped aside, inviting the officers in with calm composure. They searched. They found nothing. They left, apologetic. As the cruisers drove off, Reggie turned slowly, locking eyes with Blythe across the street. She smiled faintly, sipping from a wine glass like she hadn't just weaponized the police against him. That was her last card, he realized. Lies, false reports, trying to get him arrested or at least rattled. But instead of breaking him, it steeled him. Reggie wasn't just going to defend his driveway anymore. He was going to end this. After the false police call, Reggie knew Blythe wouldn't stop until she was embarrassed, exposed, and stripped of the power she clung to like oxygen. So he got organized. The folder he'd labeled Blythe grew thicker by the day. Photos of her car in his driveway. Copies of the HOA's passive-aggressive letters. Screenshots of her smear emails. And now, a police incident report with unfounded stamped across the page. But evidence wasn't enough. Reggie needed leverage. That weekend, he went door to door. At first, some neighbors were hesitant, burned too many times by Blythe's fines and complaints. But once he explained, the stories poured out like floodwater. She ticketed me $50 for a garden gnome. She called animal control on my dog twice. She tried to ban my teenage son's pickup truck from parking in the driveway. Reggie listened, collected statements, and offered copies of his photos. Soon, what started as one man's feud became a neighborhood chorus. Everyone had been stung by Blythe's petty tyranny. Then he struck. The next HOA meeting, Reggie arrived with a neat binder in hand. When his turn to speak came, he didn't rant. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he laid out the evidence. Calm, professional, relentless. Page 1. Blythe's Lexus, parked illegally. Page 2. The HOA complaint letters targeting him days after he had her towed. Page 3. Sworn statements from half a dozen neighbors describing years of harassment. Page 4. The false police report, annotated in bold. By the time he was done, the room was dead silent, except for the occasional muffled laugh. Blythe sat rigid in her chair, face pale, fingers twitching on her gavel. For the first time, she looked small. One board member cleared his throat. Mrs. Vanderholt, these allegations are serious. Very serious. And then another neighbor spoke up. Maybe it's time we consider new leadership. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then building until it filled the room. Reggie didn't clap. He didn't need to. He just sat back and watched as Blythe's carefully constructed empire started to crumble in front of everyone. She wasn't defeated yet. But for the first time, she knew she could be. Blythe had always carried herself like royalty. Chin high, voice crisp, every word sharpened to cut. But after Reggie's presentation, the cracks were showing. The next week, neighbors noticed her snapping at landscapers, yelling at delivery drivers, even scolding kids riding bikes too close to her lawn. Her carefully styled hair looked frazzled, her perfect smiles forced. One evening, as Reggie watered his lawn, he saw her across the street arguing with a family who had just moved in. She gestured wildly at their minivan, shrieking about property values. The new neighbors just stared, bewildered, before finally shutting their door in her face. The Queen had lost her court. Even the HOA board distanced themselves. The president sent out an email politely thanking Mrs. Vanderholt for her years of service, while announcing an emergency election. It was a death sentence for her reign. That night, Reggie spotted her Lexus, miraculously parked in her own driveway. She sat inside, hands gripping the wheel, staring at his house like she could will him into submission. But there was no gavel, no tow, no flyer that could save her. For the first time, Blythe wasn't feared. She was pitted, and that, Reggie thought, was worse for her than losing outright. The night of the emergency HOA election, the community center was packed. Neighbors who hadn't attended a meeting in years showed up, eager to watch history. Blythe marched to the front, gavel in hand, as if nothing had changed. She plastered on her trademark smile, but her voice quivered when she called the meeting to order. "This is a witch hunt," she declared. "I have served this neighborhood faithfully for 10 years. You all know what I've done for property values, for safety, for order." The crowd shifted uneasily, no applause, no nods of agreement, only silence. Reggie sat in the second row, calm as ever, binder closed on his lap. He didn't need to speak. The neighborhood had already spoken for him. When the votes were cast, the outcome wasn't even close. The The secretary read the results aloud. By a margin of 27-3, Blythe Vanderholt is hereby removed as HOA chair. A ripple of laughter, then cheers. Someone even clapped Reggie on the shoulder. Blythe's face went crimson. She slammed her gavel so hard it cracked. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "All of you. This neighborhood will fall apart without me." But her words only drew more laughter. Neighbors stood, filing out, ignoring her meltdown. As she shouted after them, her voice cracked. Not with anger this time, but desperation. For the first time, Blythe Vanderholt wasn't the queen of anything. She was just another neighbor. One who had finally burned every bridge she had. Reggie walked past her without a word. Victory didn't need a speech. The weeks after Blythe's removal felt like a different neighborhood. Kids played basketball in driveways without complaint. Garden gnomes sprouted proudly on front lawns. Neighbors who had barely spoken before started waving to each other, united by the strange relief of freedom. At first, Blythe tried to linger, driving by slowly, glaring at Reggie's house, muttering about appeals and lawsuits. But when no one paid her mind, her presence shrank. Her Lexus began spending more time away from the block than in it. By month's end, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. The day the moving truck pulled up, a quiet cheer spread through the street. Reggie watched from his porch as Blythe supervised the loading, her once pristine posture sagging. She glanced his way only once, eyes full of venom and exhaustion. Reggie just lifted his water bottle in a silent toast. She turned away. When the truck rolled off, the street seemed to exhale. A neighbor walked over with a plate of brownies. Another invited Reggie to a weekend barbecue. For the first time, he wasn't just the guy in the brick house. He was part of the block. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Reggie pulled into his driveway and parked without hesitation. No Lexus, no flyers, no petty power games, just quiet. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the sound of laughter drifting across the street. The war was over, and in the end, Reggie hadn't just won his driveway back. He'd won the neighborhood.